What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Movie Emporium's Flashback Reviews, where I take movies from the past, break them down, tell you what I think about it. As you can see, I'm back again with Rob. It's like Rob's taking over my channel. This is the second video this week that he's been in. I'm afraid for my channel and what it's going to become. Maybe Rob can save it from the depths of, the grail and depths of the seal. Maybe he's going to cut it up with some spinning fake blades. I don't know. Rob, are you going to do any of that?
Probably
You're gonna
not.
throw me out of a hot air balloon.
Most likely, this is the jumping of the shark moment for your channel, actually,
I
by
mean,
bringing
as
me
long
on.
right. You're now like in the what 8 timers club, so you got to eventually take over and become the host or something like that. I don't know. We'll see how it works out. So, Rob, you talked to me about Jurassic Park, another a Spielberg film, the only
Yeah,
Spielberg film we've ever seen in our entire life, right?
that was the first movie I ever watched of Spielberg's, and I think the last
Yeah,
until I
he never
watched
did
another one.
anything right. I say he never did anything before or after that was worthy of a watch. But okay, so we're continuing our Indiana Jones roads or journey or whatever you want to call it to the Dial of Destiny. Hopefully, the next great film in the Indiana Jones series. Rob, originally I was only bringing you on for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Of course, Jurassic Park turned 30, so that it trying to change things. But I don't know about you with Indiana Jones. It's a great series, as warts and all. Temple of Doom's pretty
Mm.
good. Is this the first film that you remember of Indiana Jones seeing in the theater, or did you see any of the other ones in theater? Like, did you even see this one in the theater? What's your kind of history with this film?
I don't think I saw any of them. If I did see any of them in the theater, it would have been this one, but I don't believe I saw any of them in the theater. Not that I can remember. I think most of the movies that I saw growing up were all VHS because we didn't really get to the theater too often. But I think actually the first Indiana Jones movie I ever watched was part of Raiders because I always remember the big Rolling Stones or ball,
Right.
whatever you call it, boulder. But I think the first like full one I watched was Temple of Doom, and
Oh,
I
okay.
never
Okay.
and I was never like a huge fan. I mean, I've gone back and watched it and I like it, but I was never a huge fan. But
Yeah.
it was I think The Last Crusade definitely is my favorite overall. I like Raiders a lot also, but I think Last Crusade has always just kind of stood out in my mind. I don't know like when it was the first time I saw it, but as far as the franchise goes, this one has definitely kind of just stood out to me.
Yeah, this is one of those films that I think is perfect. It perfectly encapsulates our youth as that film that came out at the right time for us. Because there's always a film that somebody can talk about that came out like at that specific moment. Like this was a year. This came out in like May of 1989. Of course, this was like one of the biggest years in movie history with stuff like Batman and Lethal Weapon 2 coming out. Other films that come out at this point. But there was a ton of films that came out this year, considered one of the great history years of movie history. But this movie was an apology movie from Spielberg after Temple of Doom. I don't know if you've heard about this. Temple of Doom may have been a little bit too graphic for people. May have gone kind of straight off the off the reservation a little bit when it came to Indiana Jones movie. It may not have been as well received as Spielberg was expecting. And Spielberg, as we're aware, is a very much an apologist when it comes to his films. A lot of times, he apologized for the things he redid for E.T. He's apologized for 1940. Is it 1941? Is that the World War II movie?
Mm.
So Dan
That was
Aykroyd.
a comedy,
Just like,
wasn't it?
yeah, but I think it was called
Yeah,
1941. I think it was.
yeah. It didn't have
He's
John
a guy.
Belushi. Was he
Yeah,
in it
John
too?
Belushi. Yeah, it was like a World War II movie.
Mm.
He's a guy that's very much he has his heart on the right shoulder, right sleeve, or right place. But he's a guy that will make projects like Indiana Jones and Temple Doom, or even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, or in 1941, and he'll realize that he makes mistakes, and he tries to go back and correct them. And this was a film that, like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, like Dial of Destiny, had a lot of history behind it. It was a film that was originally supposed to be put out like 2 years after Temple of Doom. Then Spielberg was kind of got involved with Big and Rayman, two classics in their own right. And he actually was asking the original writers of Temple of Doom to do this. They decided they didn't want to, and so he brought in his writer from The Color Purple, which is I don't even want to begin to guess how to say this name, but this person was brought in to script this movie. And originally they wanted, with the help of George Lucas, of course, because George Lucas doesn't have any crazy thoughts in his head, apparently, or maybe he does, that they wanted to set this in Scotland and deal with a ghost, the Monkey King, a ghost and stuff like that. So there's going to be a Scottish ghost in this movie. I don't know if it's going to be one of the Highlanders. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about. And, you know, it's just, I don't know. How do you feel about that? Like I'll get into the other thing that they were planning on doing, but like Scottish ghost in an Indiana Jones movie, this is as bad as I don't know how you feel, but this is kind of as bad as I don't know, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull with aliens.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, but it goes along with I don't know if it's just Spielberg, but you always hear about like, and with Ghostbusters too, is one of the movies that you always hear about the alternate original versions, and there's elements of them that seem like, oh, that could have been cool, but maybe it would have been like overboard. Or even thinking about like Jaws, how had the shark not broke down, would it have been too much to see the shark all the time? And
Yeah.
so I feel like there's always these stories of movies having these like really crazy over the top ideas, and then as they go through production it kind of gets sorted out and streamlined, and they find like the really good decent story. And I kind of wonder if this is another case of that, or I don't know if you know why they didn't go that direction, or if somebody like convinced them it was a bad idea or not. But it just, that kind of reminds me of like, you always hear these stories of like, oh, this is what it was originally intended to be, and then it became this and it was actually good.
Well, the great thing about it is that you can actually find these scripts online. There's a site called simplyscripts.com, and you can go in there and you can actually read the different drafts. Like you can read, I think at some point, I don't know if they've taken it down, you can actually read James Cameron's Spider-Man script, and it's fascinating. Oh, yeah. It's crazy. You probably have read it, right?
I read about half of it. I never finished it, but I started reading. I think I still have it on my phone.
Right. I mean, it's fascinating. I think James Cameron would have knocked it out of the park with a Spider-Man film, especially in '94.
There's some
with similarities
the special effects between the Sam Raimi one and that too. A few things.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I haven't read in forever, but I'm assuming you're probably right that Sam Raimi might brought a little bit over, because that's what they did in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where Frank Darabont wrote the draft is called "In the Invaders of Mars" or something like that. I can't remember offhand what it's exactly called, and it has the ant sequence, the one that with he fights the Russian guy in the ants and stuff like that. But he also, after the thing with this writer that he worked with, Color Purple submitted, he brought in Chris Columbus to pitch a different idea. And Chris Columbus, of course, is known for doing the Goonies and Gremlins and, you know, Mrs. Doubtfire and stuff like that, Harry Potter. And I don't think Chris Columbus is a wholly talented director. I think he's a competent director and writer, but his Gremlin script, as we're both aware, was really dark and disturbing and very, very violent. It was actually R-rated when it was pitched to Spielberg, and Spielberg was like, no, we're not doing that. If I'm gonna hand the script off to Joe Dante, we need to have it make sense and have it be friendly. I mean, it's not friendly, but it's friendlier. Like, I guess Gizmo was like, right. Yeah, it's when Joe Dante's like, I'm doing whatever I want. I'm not letting you listen to me, or not, I'm not listening to you. But yeah, Chris Columbus was brought in, and he wanted to do a story about the Monkey King, and wanted to have his Indiana Jones's aide basically follow him around as a love interest, and she was gonna be crazy, like a Katharine Hepburn type character. But there was like a chess match where they used actual people as chess pieces. There was a cannibalistic Amazonian or African tribe. There was Nazis. There was it went into like Wolfenstein territory a little bit if you ever played like the updated games. It was bonkers, and apparently it just didn't work, and you got a couple drafts, but they originally kind of settled down on the idea. It was written by scriptwriter Jeffrey Boehm, with the writing credits for, of course, George Lucas. And as this movie is very closely in line with the Raiders of the Lost Ark, is this you said this is your favorite? This is my favorite of the series too, but like, what makes this movie your favorite of all the series? outside of like they finally got the script that they wanted. They finally kind of settled down on the Holy Grail, which George Lucas became interested in. The idea of bringing in, 5 years his senior Sean Connery to play his father. I mean, going into a film like this, kind of the overarching thing, what made it end up becoming your favorite?
I think that it has that kind of old serial feel to it, so you get that classic adventure feel. But also, I think this one has so many good comedic moments, and like comedy for me is I love comedy injected even into if it's a straight up horror movie. If there's like a really well written, good time comedic moment, I always will accept that. And this one has so many good little moments, like the no ticket, like when he bumps into Hitler and he signs the journal.
And the look on Indiana Jones's face when he does, he's like,
Yeah,
"Ooh, this is gonna be worth something."
So I think it's just, it's kind of one of those movies to me where all of the elements that came before it that maybe that, they learned from Raiders and from
Yeah.
Temple of Doom kind of came together to make, I don't want to say like the perfect version, but like, yeah, the perfect version of what an Indiana Jones movie is about. And you also kind of get into his backstory, like when he was little and they do a little bait and switch a little bit. You don't know that that's Indiana at the beginning. You see whoever, I don't know the actor's name that plays like the guy he gets the hat from or whatever, but
oh yeah, I know who you're talking about.
They make it seem like, oh, that's him, and then he turns around, you're like, wait, oh, he's the River Phoenix. So, and then bringing in Sean Connery, of course, but yeah, I think it's just a combination of everything that made the other two entertaining and exciting. I think it all just comes together and flows so well in this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect film, any right?
Yeah.
There are some weird moments that just bring my biggest complaint of this movie, and though I really like it still, is Denholm Elliott's character. I love Denholm Elliott. I think he's done some great stuff in his career, but he turned him into a buffoon, which doesn't. I know he's only in Raiders of the Lost Ark for like 5 minutes. I'm glad they brought him back to fill out a bigger role, but he feels like a guy that went from being an actual scholar to the head. I mean, I think he was the head of the school, or at least the head of the department that Indiana worked in. He turned into like the guy that came like get out of his own museum, like a guy who gets lost in the middle of a market and wherever John Rhys-Davies' character Solo's at. And I think he works well, and he works really well with Sean Connery as like really good friends, really old friends, as they've kind of alluded to. It's just a really weird turn for a character. It almost feels like he is. I don't know. How do you feel about it? But it's just really weird.
I have sometimes wondered if that whole change of his character all came about from the one joke that Indiana Jones, when he tells them that he has the journal and he's a master. I forgot like the whole line, but he's like a master of disguise. He can blend in everywhere. He says like this whole very dramatic thing, and then it cuts to him being lost in the middle of. And I almost wonder if they wrote that and they're like, oh, this is so funny, let's just make him kind of like this so that we can keep this joke in there. But I don't know if that's the case, but like it's such a great cut from this dramatic like saying how he's this guy of espionage almost, to showing him being this bumbling guy going, hello, does anybody speak English?
Well, it's also funny, like at the end of the movie when you see him riding a horse, and Indiana Jones has to go save him from falling off the horse, so he's like holding him up until the very end shot. And I mean, it's funny, like if they had made that character in Raiders kind of like that to begin with, I think I would have liked it more. It's such a weird turn, even for Denholm Elliott. It feels like he's in like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or something like that type of character. Maybe
it feels like the character is one that he would have been, because he it seems like he volunteered to go along, like with no like he didn't care. But the type of character he was seems like one that is put in a situation where Indiana Jones is like, you have to come with me, and he's like, I don't ever leave the university, and he's like, you have to come, because of like whatever reason he has to be there, and he's totally out of his element, and that's what that character feels like. But they didn't really set up, he just kind of went along and just happens to be somebody who's not good outside of the library or outside of the university.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, there is some logic to that him being out of his elements. He's like asking people if they speak English, because
Yeah.
a guy who's a scholar of archaeology or of the
Yeah.
arts or whatever wouldn't know how to speak at least some languages, which I find kind of funny. But I mean that's really my only main problem with this movie, because the setup is pretty nice. The idea that Indy, as good as he is at his career of archaeology and finding lost artifacts and becoming a swashbuckler and an hero and stuff like that, he's still a guy that makes mistakes. And I kind of love that. And I love the setup to this movie where we get Indiana Jones as a teenager in 1912, and he with his school group, or I think they're in Utah, or
Yeah.
I don't know, is it Utah where they're at? Is it where it's set at, like in the beginning?
It looks like, I mean, the setting looks like Utah, but I
Yeah,
don't know if
Utah.
that's
Yeah,
where
yeah.
it's supposed to be.
Right. And this is the stuff, like, I did see this movie in the theaters as a kid, when I was very young. I think I was like 6 or 7 years old. So I remember the scene very well, being like the part I really loved, because it's every kid's fantasy to go on at least most kids' fantasy. I don't know about about you or me.
Yeah.
It just, most kids' fantasies are, oh,
Treasure hunt.
you get in this, what's that?
Like a treasure hunt.
Yeah, you get in this adventure where you're being chased after by the bad guy. You find a trophy, and in this movie, it feels like a Spielberg fantasy where he gets chased on a train by these bad guys, and there's like lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! And we learn the origins of his. It's a little goofy, but we learn his origins of like snakes and stuff like that. How he became afraid of snakes.
It never, to me, I never really felt that made sense. I mean, I guess in some
Oh
way it
yeah,
makes
yeah,
sense, but like to me, nothing happened. They don't show anything that happens that gives him a
yeah.
fear of snakes, because he still doesn't really, when he's young, he still doesn't really seem like he's scared, because he even picks one up, and then I know he
Yeah.
falls into the train car. That was one thing about the movie that I always felt was missing, was like, if they're gonna show that moment of like what like made him have that big fear of snakes,
Well, that,
which
and
isn't
you
a
think
huge deal, but if they're gonna show it,
right. Yeah, you think he'd be like, he would almost be choked out by a snake or something on an adventure or something like that. But you think he'd be more scared of like lions or a rhinoceros,
yeah,
since he almost gets impaled by a rhinoceros. And I love it. I love that River Phoenix he's a guy that unfortunately passed away at a very young age, but he shows such charismatic ability as young Indiana Jones. Like, I don't know how you feel about Sean Patrick Flannery as Indiana Jones in the TV series. I don't know if you watched the TV series at all.
young Indiana
It's on,
Jones.
yeah, it's on Disney Plus right now. But
I think I may have seen like one episode years back, but
oh,
I don't
okay,
really know.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Sean Patrick Flannery's fine as young Indiana Jones, but I think River Phoenix had a very interesting kind of feel about him that really fits into a young, wet behind the ears, but also a guy that's really interested in whatever history and stuff like that. And it really shows with his knowledge of the amulet of Coronado, or whatever it's called. And he's like, he knows all about it. I do think it's a little weird that he's like, oh, it should be in a museum. I'm like, you just pulled that out of, like, is this like Indiana Jones's catchphrase for his whole life? It should be his dad should be in a museum because he knows all about the Ark of the Army, or about the Holy Grail. But I mean, like I said, this train sequence is pure Spielberg. It's pure action. It's fun. It really sets up Indiana Jones as a young crusader. He's a guy that has wits about him. He flies on that little pole thing to evade the bad guys, the water tower thing, which I think is actually an homage to Buster Keaton. I don't know. Have you ever watched Buster Keaton at all?
Yeah.
So you remember Sherlock Jr.?
I don't know if I ever watched that. I mean, I've
Okay.
seen like clips. I don't know if I've ever like I've sat down like on YouTube and watched Buster Keaton clips, but I've never.
Sherlock Jr. is the one where he broke his neck. He basically, he's walking on a train, and he actually, I think he hits a pole or something and moves around the pole, or tries to climb down the pole, and the water hits him and he falls to the ground and runs off. That's that scene. I think this is an homage to that scene a little bit, just because of the pole, because of how it's used and stuff like that. This is a train sequence, which is very much what Buster Keaton did with like the general and stuff like that. But I love that he uses, like, he's really smart about trying to evade the bad guys. The bad guys think they have the upper hand, and then he goes into the magic cart. Oh, actually, before that, before the magic cart, he goes down to the lion pit, and that's where he gets this famous scar that he actually got in a seatbelt or something like that. So I think that's a clever little piece of like, oh, he learned how to use a whip, but then he ended up like hitting himself in the face with it.
But that's from a Harrison Ford score.
No, yeah, the
Is
Harrison
that?
Ford scar that he has, he actually got from a seatbelt that was too hot or
Okay.
something like that. But in the canon of Indiana Jones, he got the scar from
Yeah.
trying to whip a lion, that type of thing. So
It's kind of like Luke being attacked by the, I don't know,
yeah,
abominable snowman, whatever he's called.
yeah, and then getting that scar that he got in the car crash. But the magic cart is a little goofy. You know, he's able to get in the box, escape underneath the train, didn't die, and he runs
I was
off.
always
And
like, why would the magic box have a hole in the train?
right. I guess the walls of the train just fall down so they can use the magic trick from the. It's suspension. It's like we talked about
Yeah.
Jurassic Park. There's a lot of suspension of disbelief in Spielberg movies that you kind of have to forgive.
Yeah.
Just because you have to find a way for Indiana Jones to escape. He's not getting out the back, of course. But you know what? We have this opening in the bottom of the the bottom of
Yeah.
the train.
Well, it goes back to
But
what we talked about in Jurassic Park. Sometimes it's
yeah,
about whether not continuity or believability, but emotion. And if it's cool and it's like, unique, uh, it's sometimes better to go with that than something that 100% makes sense.
right. And I think Michael Kahn, who has been Spielberg's editor for pretty much his whole career, kind of understands that when it comes to Spielberg. He probably watches Spielberg's like rough edits when he's editing, or has his subordinates in editing and stuff like that. And he looks at it, he probably just shakes his head. He's like, "That's Spielberg for you." And then he just goes to edit. He's like, "I'm getting paid. I'm gonna win my Oscars or whatever," and that's how it rolls. So
Yeah.
but like there's a lot of origins of like there's the quote unquote origins of the snake thing, which as you've explained is not really doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But there's the origin of the scar, which is not something that you really pay attention to in the Indiana Jones series.
Yeah.
You just know he has a scar because Harrison Ford has a scar. You just don't think about it, but they're like, okay, we're gonna add that in there. And then he takes the trophy home to his dad, who's of course voiced by Sean Connery, but not actually seen. And this is where we get the first glimpse of the Holy Grail Bible, or the Grail diary that he has. And I gotta ask you this, as somebody who I'm not religious in any form or fashion, but I find the kind of history and kind of the mythology behind Christianity and Catholicism
Mhm.
really fascinating because of like the Bible and kind of what it does and what it represents and how it plays on like fictional lore tales and stuff like that. Like as a movie that the first one dealt with the Ark of the Covenant, the second one dealt with cults. This one's dealing with one of the ultimate finds, which is the Holy Grail and
Mhm.
Jesus, stuff like that. I mean, what do you think about that kind of thing when it comes to it? I haven't been able to ask you. I've asked the other guys. What do you think about religion used in a kind of a sense like this as an action adventure, escapism type of thing?
I think it's something that definitely draws a lot of people in, especially like in the West and Western culture, because just Christianity and the history of it's so kind of ingrained in the history
Yeah,
of, the West, that it's basically the mythology of the West, compares to what Eastern mythology might be. So looking up things like the Holy Grail and the Lost Ark and the commandment tablets and things like that could be another one. I think it definitely is probably one of the most interesting like archaeological avenues you could go for some kind of
yeah,
movie like this, where people are. And then aside from that, you look at like maybe National Treasure, where it's just focused US historical, or like or even goes back to what were the Knights of the
Knights of Templar.
Knights Templar, stuff like that, which is
Yeah,
also Western, and which also loops back into Christianity, actually. Just,
right.
I think everything since like Roman Empire, the Greeks, and them becoming like Catholics in the day, and then the that leads into England becoming the Knights Templar and all that. It's just, I mean, to me, it's very interesting. I think that's, you know, it touches on something that's ingrained in kind of Western culture that I think attracts a lot of people.
Right, because I mean, you'll see it like later on with like was it Kingdom of this Crystal Skull, when they venture into like real hard sci-fi stuff. I don't think it works as well, because I think the idea of aliens and like the possibility of aliens being real is fascinating, but when you get into like what could be when it comes to religion and religious artifacts and how, like you said, how ingrained they are into culture, I think it becomes much more interesting. I think they can weave an interesting kind of adventure to it, because the idea of somebody finding the Holy Grail would not be like a one-man quest. It would be like a like almost like a Ready Player One quest in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
where the idea of like multiple groups of people trying to find it and what they would use it for is fascinating. And I think that's where it misses the mark in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and from what I hear, and possibly Dial of Destiny, maybe. Like I said, I haven't seen it yet, but I don't know. I just find the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant really have an interesting kind of weight to them that, if taken, could lead to some serious conflict. I mean, they talk about in Raiders of the Lost Ark, in this movie, you know, if the Nazis get a hold of it, that's darkness will fall upon the earth, that type of thing. And, you know, if aliens, I mean, the Russians want to find aliens, sure, I guess. What are they going to do with that tech? Fly into space? They'll get stopped by Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum. You know?
And I don't know as much about like things that might be like Eastern culture or African culture, or even like South American Mayan. So I imagine there's kind of the supernatural elements that the like Christianity stuff would have to it. But I think being a movie that's made primarily, I mean, in the day, primarily for an American audience or European audience, I think that's why they hit so much more like interest in people than when they go to do aliens and sci-fi.
Yeah, it's
but I do think that I think if they would have continued and not did aliens, and I don't know what really Dial of Destiny's about, but I think it could have been interesting to explore more of like Mayan history or like Eastern artifacts and things. I think that, because they kind of sort of went into that with Temple of Doom by going into India. That is a lot of Eastern.
Well, I think I think Kingdom of Crystal Skull kind of dealt with Aztec culture a little bit, or at least the Mayan culture or something like that.
Oh, that's right.
I just think
I saw it.
Well,
once.
I mean, but it still dealt with like the aliens are the ones that create us, which has always been a theory amongst like scholars, that aliens came down from wherever, and that's why we have
Ridley
these like
Scott.
hieroglyphs, like Stargate or some nonsense. But I don't know. It's just the idea of like holy items, or something you see in a lot of video games and stuff like that. So having like the Coronado amulet and stuff like that, and having all these the book, and you kind of have, once again, you have to suspend disbelief in how Sean Connery's character, Henry Jones Sr., is able to deduce everything that they do in this movie into a book from articles he found and all this stuff. It's like you're putting a lot of faith into essentially a book that a scholar himself started researching. That'd be like if I researched I don't know, gold in the middle of like Orlando or something like that, and I found papers and stuff like that, and of history of like, oh, they once found a piece of gold in the lakes of Lake Eola or something like that. It's that kind of stuff where you're just like, okay, I guess you need a MacGuffin and a plot device, and you need a little bit of out there mythology. But it makes me laugh when you think about it, because there's no way somebody from America was able to easily dissect and put down where the Holy Grail is. It's crazy.
I think this is also another one of those movies that you look at that couldn't be made today, or like it couldn't be made. It could be made today, but I'm saying like it couldn't be made like in movie modern day, like being in the 1930s or 40s. I think it's in the 30s or 40s.
Like 36 or something.
Okay.
Yeah. 38er, yeah.
Because when you start looking at things like the big ruins that they find at the end, that I keep wanting to say Carmitage, but was that, I don't know, that might
What,
be
the thing
other
they go
random
into?
movie.
It's actually it's a famous thing in I think Egypt or something like that.
Yeah.
The location. Yeah, I know what you're talking
But like
about.
people would have found that already.
Uh-huh.
It, in modern day. So it's like one of those things where it has the perfect setting for something like that to make it a little bit more believable that maybe nobody has found these ruins. But one
Right.
thing that with like Raiders, the entries to things were a lot more hidden
Yeah.
than this is just a giant build structure out in the desert that somebody could have walked down the wrong way and found it. But
Right. Yeah, the knight that was in that temple is just happens like he's walking around, he's looking for water. He takes
yeah.
a big old swig of the cup of Christ in the water and he lives forever. He's like, son of a bitch. I went the wrong direction. I should have went right when I should have gone left, that type of thing. But
I mean, and we might get to the rules and the reveal later, but I guess I can wait till you get to that point.
okay, yeah, whatever you want to do. It's no big deal to me. That's why you're here, Rob, to swerve when I'm
Well, I
supposed to
was
swerve
just
the other direction.
so to swerve in one direction, the band One Direction. I just want to talk about them. No, I'm just
Yeah, that's
so
fine.
the twist of the movie is that they find the cup that creates
Yeah.
eternal life, but only before the seal. Like if you leave the seal, then you don't have eternal life, and then you can't bring the cup past that either. So it's like I always thought that was an interesting kind of twist to it, that even if somebody does find it, it really does them no good because they're only eternal life by guarding the very thing that they were seeking.
Right. And that's actually a good way for the cup or the Holy Grail to be hidden for the rest. I mean, at this point though, these four individuals that end up living at the end have to keep the secret of where the Holy Grail is, like for the
Yeah.
rest of their life. So you can imagine like everything that Indiana Jones knows, he's under like secret security clearance for like the Ark of the Covenant and like the Kali Ma, goons and stuff like that, and of course the Holy Grail. This guy's like the most important like scholar in history. And you can't tell anybody anything because the Porkins from Star Wars is like, you can't say anything because we're gonna hide everything and we're gonna put you in a museum where nobody can see you. And I never thought about that till just now, that like he's the most important scholar in history. He's seen like the most important artifacts. And he can't tell anybody about it.
Everything is.
Yeah, that's why he drinks the whole time. But but we also see the origins of the hat, which is his famous kind of one of his famous monikers. It's apparently given to him by the guy who's chasing him to get the Coronado, across the Coronado back, and then he just gets punched in the face when it shoots back like 40 years later or 30 years later by the same guy who's now like this overweight seafaring guy with like, he's probably mad because he had to give his hat away to a young person who is mad at him. And I just like the fact that
I never put together that was the same guy.
Oh, really? It may not be. I mean, maybe it's just a coincidence that they just did like a good transition. But I always felt that it was just the same guy who's much older. I mean, maybe that guy ended up dying of like, I don't know, whatever virus they had in the 1920s or the yellow fever.
A common cold.
A common cold, right? He died of strep throat. I don't know.
Sprained ankle.
Yeah. Yeah, as soon as he walked out the door, he died. He just fell on the ground and passed away. But I this is another thing where I like the transition. I like the fact that Indiana Jones has been on this quest to find this one item for like 30 years. At no point in the 30 years was he able to find it until now on a ship in the middle of a rainstorm. I'm pretty sure there was a T-Rex somewhere like streaming about. And then like, the guy who is the one that has the artifact is the main bad guy in this segment. At no point do they think that like, the barrels of fuel or whatever they have on the ship is going to explode in the middle of a rainstorm. And it's a great sequence because it shows Indy getting hit and he hits back and he flies off into the ocean where to maybe get eaten by a shark. Who knows? There's a lot of luck going on in this portion, but he gets the cross back and he punches a few guys and the ship explodes. And I don't know. I don't know how you feel about that.
That's that. The whole
And that's that.
his
Indiana
life's
Jones has
quest.
saved
It's
the day.
like, I got it. Here you go. Put it in a
Yeah, I'm
box.
gonna. Of course, the Wilson, the tennis ball, floats by as he's just sitting there for
Yeah.
to wait to be rescued. I'm kind of wondering like how like at what point he gets rescued. Is there like just a ship off to the side that like I'm just confused about what's happening. Like that's never fully explained. But I'm assuming
How'd he get
he
on the
hired like a
ship?
fish person.
Was he like in hiding, stowaway? Did he like
He used the submarines
swim?
that he used in Raiders to get on the ship. He's just like, thanks Germans for letting me on the ship. That
They're
type of
just
thing.
like
But
they're just like right off the dock. They're
oh
like
no, it's just like this poor
100 feet off the dock.
yeah, it's like this poor little city, in the middle of like I don't know, East Asia or something like that, and they're watching from the side, and they're like,
You're like, that ship is on fire out there.
yeah. And then it exploded, but there's a man floating in the river.
And
I
then
think he owes
Indiana
us
Jones
money.
just swims to the shore and he gets out.
Yeah, he's like,
It's like
call my lawyer.
they didn't pay their dock
God.
fee.
I do. I think it's a fun scene. It doesn't make any sense. It's like whatever. It's like at no point in his career has he been trying to find. I feel like he got bored, so that's why he went on the Raiders of the Lost Ark adventure. And then he's like, after he got done with that, he dumped Marion. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna go find that cross again. Maybe it's in the middle of the ocean somewhere. Maybe it's maybe it rose through in the ocean. He just went diving for it. I don't know. But it leads to him going back to school. And the first movie had this movie has it where Denholm, Marcus Brody pops up. He's in the middle of teaching school. You had the young girls fawning over him as they usually do, which I don't know if you remember the first movie, but they had the girl who lowers her eyebrows and has like I love you on it or something like that, or you're hot or something like that. But
I wonder if how they handle that scene in the new one coming out, if they will do anything that's clever.
I mean, they tried
to
just
have them all
clever.
like they'll just have like in the new Dial of Destiny, he'll be like giving a speech and they're all like on their phones ignoring him.
Right. That'd be pretty funny actually. They're just sitting there in the corner staring at him from his house, old man.
Yeah.
But I really love this scene because the one joke that's been running, especially happens in the first movie, you think about it, like Temple of Doom. How much money do the substitute teachers make off Indiana Jones? Because he's always gone. He's gone probably once. He's probably gone for like half the school year or something like that. And they do a really funny joke where they talk, Denholm, Elliott's Marcus Brody, and them talk and stuff like that about the Cross Coronado. And then he goes to where he has all his like trinkets that he has, and his archaeologist study and stuff like that. And this is one of my favorite scenes in the entire franchise because it shows that these people are literally not getting their schooling proper, where they have so many questions for Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones. The poor teacher, not the secretary for Indiana Jones, is like, these people are here because they have questions. They're all yelling questions out and stuff like that. And he's like, I'll take them in turn. And he walks into the room. Screw it.
Out the window.
I'm just gonna walk out the window because he's just like, he finds, of course, the diary from Venice is sent to him. But I just love how instead of just helping him like he says he's gonna do, he just walks out because he's the worst teacher in the world.
It's like it's all these students that are just scratching at the bit to learn whatever they can about archaeology and to study archaeology, and they want to, even if they don't go on adventures, they just want to like be a part of science. And then they get assigned this teacher who's like, I don't got time for you wanting to learn about archaeology. I gotta
go find the Holy Grail. No, the best part is like your kid goes home for a holiday or for break or something like that, and they're like, so what's your favorite teacher? And they're like, it wasn't this guy that's an archaeologist. He kind of disappears through half the year, so we don't really learn anything, but he still gave me an A, so I guess I passed. But I didn't know what to do. And they call up the school, or they call up the college, and the college goes, yeah, he's like the greatest teacher ever. He brings us back stuff and we learn things, and he helps get grants for the college. And but he's just never there. We have plenty of great substitutes.
I wonder if he just like calls the school and he's like, hey, I'm in town, I'll do a class. And then they put like a poster up and they're like, Dr. Jones is in. Everybody's like, oh, we gotta go see Dr. Jones. Do this one teach.
They're all writing names. They're all writing like comments on their eyelids. And Marcus Brody's got to be the most stressed out dean or whatever he is in the movie. It's just like that's probably why he's gone crazy and like lost his mind. So
one thing I always wondered is if like the girls in class like him because he's attractive, or because even some of the guys are like trying to scramble to ask him questions. But I wonder if people know what he does, because he's just kind of like the mild-mannered Clark Kent, like doctor, like professor while he's in school wearing the glasses and all that. But
I don't think they
in universe they have any idea that he actually goes off on these things, or they're just like, oh, he's an attractive professor that we want to.
No, it's the latter. He's an attractive guy. Like they have no idea what he's doing. The only person that knows what he's doing are Sala, Marion Ravenwood, and Marcus Brody, and maybe his dad. His dad doesn't even really know what he does. He was surprised that Indiana Jones just happened to be there to save him.
He didn't even know his name was Indiana.
Yeah, right. Same after the dog, which I love that fact that that's what Spielberg or George Lucas's dog, his name was Indiana Jones or something like that nature. But yeah, no, I love the simple fact that like he's a teacher who doesn't really he doesn't even really teach. It's hilarious. But he's recruited by a guy named Walter Donovan, who's played by, of course, Julian Glover, who, of course, was an AT-AT commander in Empire Strikes Back, as well as he played a role in, of course, Game of Thrones, I think, if I remember right. Anyways, he plays a guy who is very rich. He loves artifacts. Of course, Indiana Jones knows who he is. And he recruits Indiana to go to Italy to find the Knights Templar. And he, of course, has the stone, a piece of the stone of one of the knights. How he got it is never fully explained. Or no, it was an excavation dig or something like that he found it in. And, you know, I love Julian Glover as an actor. I think he's always been fun, especially fun as like, you know, just small roles or, you know, whatever he's doing. And he's very fun to hear as like a guy that somebody knows, but you may not be able to trust. Once again, you know, you have the setup like what the story is, what the MacGuffin is, and it's very high concept, you know, Holy Grail, find, of course, the Knights Templar, the Knights Tomb to find out where the Holy Grail is being held. And like once again, a lot of stuff has to go down. We find out that Henry Jones Sr. has been taken, that, you know, why is he in Italy? Why was he recruited? You know, we learn about this woman named Elsa Schneider who's been working with him. And I mean, the setup and stuff like that. Did you enjoy it? Like, what did you think about, you know, because this is where we truly learn what this movie is going to end up being about. And like, how did you feel about that?
I like the setup, and I like that he really wasn't. I think one of the larger themes of the movie is that Indiana Jones wasn't really all that interested in taking on this this job to find the girl. Like, he didn't care, especially because like he has a personal history with his dad pretty much ignoring him all his life, being obsessed with the Grail. So the Grail to him is like, to everybody else, the Grail is like the Holy Grail. Like even like the quote unquote, the obsession, that like the Holy Grail has become like a term for something to obsess over. And he's like the one person that doesn't care about it at all.
Actually, do you notice? I would say, do you notice that in probably all the movies, he's not even really interested in the Ark of the Covenant. I mean, he's interested, but he's not interested. Like he's more worried about the smaller trinkets, like going after the whatever idol in the cave or the Cross of Coronado. Like he's a guy that is more about like actual history than the possibility of like, you know, fictional, not fictional, but you know what I mean, like history, like that's so preposterous and so over the top that, you know, there's no way that could be real. And he kind of gets thrust into these battles where his intrigue and interest become high peak to the point where he becomes, you know, interested in these items. But you see it in like Temple of Doom, he just wants to get back to, he has that little trophy that he gives to what's his face, and he almost dies. And the only reason he's involved with the Thuggy clan and stuff like that is because he just, you know, some things happen. He unfortunately, it's the same thing here. It's like
upon the village.
Yeah, it's the same thing here. Like he don't give a crap about I mean, he cares, but he doesn't, like, he was not going searching for
it wasn't until the only reason he agreed to it is because his dad was captured, so it became more of a personal quest to save his dad. Which,
Right.
going back to even Temple of Doom, like he really got more involved because he found out, like he started finding out like kids were being,
Hmm.
uh, used as slave labor, and he was kind of became a little more personal, invested in helping on that sense. So I think that goes to just make the stories a little better and more well rounded. That it's not just like I'm searching for thing over here. It's like I have to go to find this thing because somebody that I care about is threatened, or I'm trying to help somebody, or there's a personal reason for it, rather than just like I want to find it because it's
Yeah,
important, because it can make me rich or something.
right. And you look at, like I said, back to Raiders of the Lost Ark. The only reason he's even going after the Ark is the American government are afraid that the Nazis are going to find it. So he's hired and paid money to go after, and has Marion Ravenwood with him and stuff like that. And like you said here, Henry Jones Sr. or Henry, yeah, Henry Jones Sr. is captured and taken hostage by the German army or whatever. And so he has to go over and figure out the clues to where his father is. And I love the fact that Walter Donovan says, "Don't trust anybody," and this is where outside of like the opening where I truly kind of fall in love with this movie, because we get to see like really cool landscapes. We get to Venice, Italy. We see this like converted church, which is actually converted library, which was a church, so that's actually accurate. And we get this adventure of like trying to find the knight's tomb, which leads
Mhm.
to where the possible location of the grail is at. And it's like we've talked, it's like when I was talking to Chris from Movies and Munchies. Once these movies start going, there's like slow pieces, but it just goes. It's a 2-hour movie, it runs quickly. We talk about Jurassic Park, there's no slowdown. You're getting piece after piece after piece, and it happens here where it goes from they go into the church, they find the clues of the numbers, they go under there, they had to deal with rats, which apparently is Henry Jones Sr.'s like biggest fear, is rats and stuff like that. And I mean, do you agree with that kind of stuff? Do you agree with like how it just kind of quickly picks up the pace and doesn't stop from
Yeah.
there?
No, yeah, definitely. It keeps your interest the whole time.
Yeah, it's they go down there and then they're introduced to this group of individuals who are like if you've ever watched The Mummy, which what's his face were like the protectors of the Holy Grail and the tomb, and I can't remember, I don't know exactly what they're called, but they're basically like they've been protecting the whole history of the Grail for eons and eons. And I like that at first that these bad guys are not really bad guys, they're just protectors.
Yeah.
So you get this great action sequence where they catch on fire the tunnels and stuff like that, and then they go underwater, they find the tomb, they find Alison Alexandretta and stuff like that, and then they climb out and they're being chased, and there's like this big boat sequence, which is very typical of an action adventure movie. And I
Mhm.
love that they're like, oh, don't go between the boats, and they go between the boats, and
Yeah.
people die, and like the only reason that one guy is saved because he's not willing to give up information. And you find out the guy is just protector. He's not a bad guy. He's just a protector. I love that twist
Yeah.
because most of the time when Indiana Jones fights people, they're usually bad people. This time they're
Mhm.
just people that are just protecting. That's all that matters. And I love that. And I mean, I
And
don't
it
know how you
throws
feel about
to
it.
and it throws it back to when he was told not to trust anybody, because now you think, okay, well, like as a viewer, you're like, these are the bad guys. I know for sure
Yeah.
now. And then you're like, oh no, these aren't the bad. Okay, so now who is he trust? Like you start to suspect other people and
Yeah.
wonder who he shouldn't trust. And
Right. And I love the kind of like the twists and turns that happen, because once that whole situation happens and they go back to the room, like there's the messing up of the room itself to look for the grail and all that good stuff. And it's clever stuff because it allows some history with the idea of what the Holy Grail represents, and the idea of this adventure, and like a treasure quest as Indiana Jones has always had. But it feels like it's well thought out, it's well planned out, and just it feels like it goes by so quickly, but it feels like you're enthralled. And that's what makes good action adventure movies. And that the look and feel of this is a movie that is shot by Douglas Slocum, who did the other two movies. So he's a well famous, I think he did like Aliens or Blade Runner or something like that. Well, he's a pretty well known cinematographer. That this was his last film with Spielberg, but it just there's that sense of adventure that only these films seem to be able to get down perfectly.
Yeah.
That not a lot of it, like maybe you'll get a Mummy or maybe you'll get a National Treasure, but I think that's why these movies are so popular as they are, is just because there's so much fun with just the action involved and the
There's something
mystery and the
about
intrigue.
there's something about the way the action works so well with each set piece that in every scene just builds on top of one
Yeah.
another. Like the way they work at the boat. Oh, okay, now we're coming up to the two boats that they have to go between, and like it just
uh,
elevates in threat when they're on the tank and he gets
yeah.
on the side of it, and they start like riding him into the wall of the rock wall, and there's the edge of
Right.
the rock wall coming, and he's like, how is he going to get off of it? And I
Yeah,
think
it's
at that
like,
point inside you have Sean Connery like fumbling with a gun, like he can't even figure out how to pick it up. And
and they use like the pen and stuff like that, the ink to like blind one of the guys, and Indiana Jones with
yeah,
a rock into it's good stuff. And it like this leads into the sequence with the where they go to the castle of Broomhill or something like that in Austria.
mm,
And this is actually my favorite moment of this whole entire, outside like the little, you know, when they go into and they do the little puzzle pieces things with like the word of God and stuff like that.
mhm,
But I love this stuff in the German castle because one, we finally get introduced to Sean Connery 35 minutes into the movie, so it's quite a
yeah,
while before we actually see him in person. But it has like one of my favorite moments where Elsa and Indiana Jones switch costumes or whatever, switch like clothes, and he walks in there as like an art designer in the middle of like, you know, the night, saying that he's there to like to check the tapestries. And he goes, well, if you are Scottish Law, then I am Mickey Mouse, which apparently was put in there because people, it got a big laugh among the writers and stuff like that. And
is he the
it's just
Scottish
great.
ghost?
Right. It's probably a reference to that. Absolutely. They probably just like took the ghost out and they're like, I think Ghostbusters had just came out, so maybe we won't do
Yeah,
that. But I like the small details of like, you know, it's a just another place for the Nazi army to keep tabs on people. There's like that whole networking system, and then like they're searching for Henry Jones Sr. and he's like knocking on the doors, but then he doesn't knock on one of them. It's like, how do you know he's in there? Oh, well, they have the alarm system. Like, see, that's good attention to detail. Like,
yeah.
you know, most movies like this would never do that, but you know, once again, it's pouring down rain and he's using the whip to, you know, go from one side of the building to the other and back and forth. And this is one of the great introductions to a character, because as soon as he walks into, or as soon as he goes into the room, Indiana Jones Sr. just knocks him out with the fake china
And,
vase or vase or whatever.
and then he cares more about whether that was a real artifact or fake than that he just gave his son a concussion.
Right. And then he's like, and then he comes in the frame and he's like, Junior. He's like, why are you here? He's like, I'm here to save you, Dad. He's so confused about what's going on, but he's like, but then he goes
At
back to the
least,
vase. He's like, look, it's fake. He's like, well, they're coming, Father. They're coming to save us or coming to like kill us, something like that.
well, at least they
And
won't get the journal because I sent it to you to keep safe. Oh, and then
I
he's
should have
like,
sent it
you
to the Marx
brought it.
Brothers. You fool. He's like, I came here to save you. And who's going to save you, Junior? I'm just going to grab a gun, shoot everybody.
Yeah, yeah,
He's like, who are you?
that's a great escape scene.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's probably as good as the swordsman where he just pulls his gun out and shoots him.
Yeah.
I think that scene of him escaping is like on that same level because
Oh,
you just don't
that
expect him to just go just
right. That reminds me. There's a running joke in the Indiana Jones series I never knew. So the first movie fights the swordsman, shoots him. The second movie, being a prequel, is kind of play off of that scene where the two thuggy swordsmen are attacking him, and he realizes he doesn't have the gun, which could play into the next movie where he just doesn't want to deal with them anymore.
oh,
This movie, there are three Nazi soldiers attacking him in unison, and he shoots all three of them at once. The bullet goes straight through all of them. So I think it's a running. It's like I don't know if you ever watched Community, but there was a joke in Community where for the first three episodes, at least one episode, they said Beetlejuice. And in the third season, in that third episode, they say Beetlejuice, and Beetlejuice comes walking across the screen in the background.
Huh.
So I don't know if they meant to do this, but it feels like a running joke where they have one guy in the first movie, two guys in the second one, and three guys in the third one. I don't know if that happens in the fourth movie, but I saw that today, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of funny. So, but yeah, I love the fact that this kind of makes me laugh a little bit, but I never really thought about this till I watched it like a couple years ago. They go into the room and there is Elsa Schneider being taken hostage by the main Nazi bad guy or whatever. She mentioned Henry Sr. mentioned something about knowing a lot about her, and then Indiana Jones just gives Henry Jones Sr. a look, like he turns his head. He's like, yeah. And I don't know if you get that joke at all, but it basically means that they both have slept with this woman. Yeah. Which is a lot. It's like the Back to the Future thing. There's a lot going on there, a lot of therapy going on there. But I thought that was like a really funny joke that's kind of disturbing if you think about it.
And what does she say when they're tied up? She comes up and she's whispering something to Indiana. She's like, had a great night and everything. But then
yeah,
Sean Connery answers. He's like, well,
and Indiana goes, oh god, the jokes in this movie are hilarious because like when they get captured, when you find out Elsa's a bad guy, which you can kind of see coming if you think about it, it's kind of obvious. And then Walter Donovan gets, is revealed to be part of the Nazi regime. Not really revealed, but he's part of the whole situation. Like the papers are ripped out. You get that quote you talked about earlier where they talk about Marcus Brody being like a spy, basically. He can blend in, never see him again. And that's when you get the scene of like Marcus trying to go through the crowds, and Sala gets introduced back into the series, which I love. And then they have to go on, they have to run away from the Nazi soldiers, and of course Marcus Brody gets put into the vehicle, which is a reference to Raiders of the Lost Ark a little bit, and then captured by the Nazis, which is hilarious and insane and all that good stuff. And it's just, that's the insanity of like this whole sequence, because it leads to the setting of the room on fire sequence, which once again, they're talking to one another, and they get the all comes to light how they both slept with the same woman. And he's like, reaching in my pocket, I got a special item in there, and it's of course a lighter. And Henry Jones Sr., being kind of not the explorer that he is, just sets the room on fire, trying to blow it out. And he's like,
Henry,
the place is on fire. What? Oh man. And then of course the fear is like, kill the American conspirators. And
and then the way to escape is they shuffle over to the fireplace, which is actually a trapdoor, and it spins around into a secret Nazi communications room.
Right. I just love the fact that the place is on fire, and the place they had to escape to is the fireplace.
Yeah.
Like it's like the exact opposite. Like usually you would not escape to the fire, but it's like open, and it like flips around, and then it comes back, and the Nazi woman's like staring at him, like the woman from Austin Powers.
Yeah.
And she lets out a scream. Oh my god.
Is that same? That's not the same actress, is it?
I don't think it is, but let me check. It would be funny if it was. Let's see. No, it is not. That'd be hilarious if it was, though.
Yeah.
I would laugh my ass off. But I mean, like they escape, and they fight the bad guys by hiding up. How Henry Jones Sr. got into the flu network area right there to fall down and punch the guys, and it's hilarious. And they lock the guys in the room, and a lot of this is crazy and hilarious, because they somehow get up into like the castle attic or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're trying to find a place out, and Henry Jones Sr. is just tired, so what does he do? He just sits in a chair and opens up a trap door,
falls down.
Yeah, it's great. It just falls. It leads up to the boat dock, which is like, this is like the greatest castle in history, because there's a boat dock and everything that is right underneath the trap door.
I'll tell you, the only part. Maybe it's the same thing you're about to say.
Well, the thing that I was talking about that actually kind of makes me mad a little bit, it bothers me every time I watch it, is okay, so they set the boat to go
Yep.
off.
Same thing.
Cool. That's a good trick. And
And they're
they're
falling
doing the
for it.
yeah, they're falling for it. Wouldn't you know where I'm going with this? Wouldn't they
Uh-huh.
wait till the boat disappeared? No, no. As soon as they get in the boat, they go off in the little cart with
They're
the
like,
sidecar. You're like,
yeah,
why did you wait? What are you doing?
just
Wait, give
wait
it like
like
5
10
minutes.
minutes. Yeah, 5
Yeah.
minutes.
But I mean, it leads into like the motorcycle, which is another homage to the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he's driving the truck, he's being chased by motorcycles and stuff like that. But I love,
Mhm.
it's a good sequence where like he uses the pole to stab into the wheel to the tire of one of the motorcycles, and
Yeah.
I mean it's a good action. Like this whole movie has great action sequences. They feel
Mhm.
fun, entertaining. They feel like they fit. They don't feel out of place. It's Spielberg's ability with his with his cinematographer and his
Yeah.
editors and stuff like that to craft great action scenes. But
And
I love how Indiana Jones is so happy with himself about like the victory, and Henry Jones Sr. is just not. He's given that very disapproving look. And Indiana Jones is like, "What? I was happy. It worked." And no,
and
it just it
the fire scene too is a great example of earlier we were talking about how the action scenes are Spielberg's so great at just making them build in tension,
yeah.
because it's like first they're tied to a chair and somebody
No.
might be coming to kill them because they like get permission to, because they get the sketches or whatever, or no,
Yeah.
they retrieve the journal, so somebody might be coming to kill them. Okay, so they got to escape. Well, now the room's on fire because he set it on
Right.
fire. Okay, well now they got to get to the fireplace. Okay, well now it's spun around and they're in a room full of Nazis with guns, and it's just
Yeah.
like the tension and the threat just keeps like ramping up and up and up through the action
Right.
scene. And Spielberg
And that
is like great with these movies with that.
Yeah, and every great action director has that ability to craft that like ongoing action sequence where it gets bigger and more absurd and more absurd. I mean, you look at we talked about this. You look at the Jurassic Park T-Rex breakout scene. It starts very slow with them stopped at the pen or whatever.
Mhm.
And then it builds up to the stomping of the T-Rex's foot. The
Mhm.
noise with the water, and then it ramps up with the goat, and then the T-Rex claw, and then the paddock just kind of breaking apart, and that's when the T-Rex gets loose.
Yeah.
It keeps going, and that's what every you look at Saving Private Ryan's the same way, where the last battle, it starts out with like this really small moment. They set up the pieces, and then it just slowly builds, and that's great action. You could tell
Yeah.
when a director is just really talented at doing something like that, and it's played out through this entire movie because even the small moments of where they decide they're going to go to Berlin, as Indy says, into the lion's den, is great because it leads into Indiana Jones having to actually listen to reason, because he's like, I want to go save Marcus Brody. We need to get the hell out of here. Like, we need to go get those pages. But Henry Jones Sr. is like, no, we need to actually get the diary, because if they get the whole diary and they figure out where it's at, they have the pieces of the puzzle, they'll be able to get the Holy Grail. And it leads into this great scene where I think it's the famous book burning thing in history,
Yep.
where actually I found this out today. Heimlich Himmler in this movie is played by the guy in the trench coat in the first movie with the one with the hand. He had the Marv thing.
That got like
It's the same
melted.
guy. Yeah, you see him as it pans across the thing, and I just love this because Indiana Jones somehow is able to punch out a guy in a Nazi uniform once again, and steal his clothes. And he, of course, Alison Doody's Elsa is there, and why she's there is never really fully explained. She just summoned there and stuff like that. He takes a book from her, but instead of that just being the end of the story and then flying off in the Zeppelin or whatever, no, he has to, like, when he walks down the steps, he has to get bombarded by a whole bunch of Hitler fans who are like pushing him towards Hitler, and we get that fantastic scene. It's like two parts disturbing, one part amazing, because once again, Indiana Jones at this point has found the Ark of the Covenant. He saved people from Kali Ma. He found all these trophies. Now he's in the midst of one of the greatest monsters in history, and he's holding out the journal that he is actually looking for. And instead of thinking about it, Hitler just opens up the book and signed it in the middle of the page, where
he like grabs the book, and there's that
yeah,
moment, like for the first time you see it, you're like, oh shit, Hitler has
Yeah,
the book in his hand now, and like Indiana Jones
right.
just hand it to him, and then the comedic twist.
He just signs it. It's like the scene I was talking to this with Triv. It's like the scene in Mission Impossible 3 when Ethan Hunt walks or runs into the building looking for his wife, and there's a guy in a gurney with his wife who's passed out, who's been knocked out, and he just walks past it. It's just that convenience of just like it's kind of awesome when you think about it type of
Yeah.
situation. Yeah, I love it.
And
But
in that same scene, there was another like before that when he's confronting Elsa, and he like grabs her by the throat, and he's like, all I
yeah,
have to do is squeeze, and she goes, all I have to do is scream. And it
right.
shows like a little bit of that she isn't fully against him. Like you're not like, she's not on his side, but she's not also against him. You can tell a little bit more that she's sort of playing both sides for whether it's personal gain or whether she has something for Indiana Jones. It's not
Yeah, you see that
100%
at the
clear,
end
but
too.
yeah.
You kind of see that because she's crying when the books are being burned, because I think she's like the German version of Indiana Jones in a way, where
Yeah,
she's
she
like the
cares about
archaeologist.
history.
Yeah, she cares about, but she's so misguided, and she's so misguided, and she's still under German rule of Nazism, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
what she believes and how she handles things is never the smartest. But I still think Alison Doody, who plays her, does a really nice job, because she feels like the damsel in distress, but she actually has like kind of a heart behind her, which is
Mhm.
not perfect, but we won't see her till later on when I think she kind of gets a little underutilized. But I just it leads, like you said, it builds this tension builds up into the Zeppelin sequence where these two individuals are being monitored, and they're being watched and looked for. And Pat Roach, who is in a deleted scene, was of course the guy who gets killed by a propeller blade in
Wow.
Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then he gets killed. He's the main thuggy bad guy in Temple of Doom. He gets killed in the rollers. He gets sucked into the rollers. He was supposed to play like a bad guy that Indiana Jones hits or something like that in this deleted scene. But I like this. This is like the small moment, also filled with action, where the main Nazi general or whatever gets on the plane, and Indiana Jones has somehow reasoned with the stewardess or the steward to take his jacket, which is too small for him. He's like checking for tickets, which I guess is reasonable. And then he goes up to the Nazi guy, finds Henry Jones Sr., says Herr, Dr. Jones or whatever. And that's when Indiana Jones goes, ticket, please. He punches him out into the right, no ticket. I love that, because it's just like the look on his face as he punches him. And then all the people just start throwing the tickets when they says no ticket. It's great
Everybody's
stuff.
like, what's going on?
I love that it takes forever for them to have the Zeppelin turn around.
Yeah.
It gives enough time for both Joneses to talk one another. It's Indiana Jones like, you never talk to me. You're more worried about your the history of the diary. And he's like, okay, we'll talk now.
You might be able to remember. So when they escape the Zeppelin, they go into that plane,
Yeah.
and Sean Connery asks him if that he didn't know, or that he knew how to fly a plane or something, and he says, I can't land. I don't know how to land. And I wondered if that was. I'm trying to remember if there was anything in Raiders, but I know in Temple of Doom when the pilots bail out and he's trying to
Yeah.
like land, and then they have to like jump out of the plane
Yeah,
and use the thing.
I believe it's an homage to it. Yeah,
And I wondered if
it's
that
a
was a
kind of a.
reference to that.
I think it is, because I think it's a reference to Indiana Jones could probably fly the plane, but it could also be a reference to him, when he crash landed the golf course or something. I mean, I'm just joking. Like 20 years before. No, I just love that these two have a discussion before that, and they're just talking. And Henry Jones Sr. is just like, okay, we'll sit here and talk. And Indiana Jones is like, I don't know what to talk about
Yeah.
now, but
What do you want to talk about? He
um,
like closes the book and waits for him. It's like, ugh.
but I love that apparently when they were filming the scene, it was so hot that Sean Connery took off his pants. Harrison Ford followed suit because it was so hot. So they're doing the whole scene in like a jacket and no pants, which is great. But yeah, I mean the plane sequence is also another comedic bit where they're being chased by the Nazis or whatever. They're in the airplanes, and Indiana Jones is flying the plane. Sean Connery is the turret gunner, and he just shoots the back of the plane. He's just like, first of all, he's like 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock, blah, 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 blah. And then he's shooting the plane, and all of a sudden Indiana can't like steer it or whatever. And he looks back and like, Sean
Are we
Harrison,
hit?
yeah, he's hit. Yes, son, I think they got us. It's like the whole movie's like this because it's just, the nerve of like Henry Jones Sr. trying to shoot them down, and it leads to them crash landing and taking a car. they crash land and they take a car and they travel. They fall into like a, I don't know, whatever beach area. And I love that Henry Jones Sr. just like he comes up with the idea
They're
of
also
using
being like when they take the car,
oh
they're
yeah,
also
shot
being
at
pursued by by fighter jets or planes.
right by like northwest style and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I just love the fact that like eventually they get onto the beach, and Henry Jones Sr. gets the white idea of using the I don't know, the pelicans or whatever birds they are. He's like he's like moving the thing back and forth. He just crash landed into the plane, and it leads them to a tunnel where they're driving, and the plane crashes into the tunnel, loses its wings, and all of a sudden you see the guy drive by, the guy fly by. He's like looking at him,
each
and
other.
it just crash landed and everything. It's great stuff. It's hilarious.
Yeah. Another where it just like builds more and more intense of an action scene.
Right. And I love it. It's that kind of stuff in this movie that makes it so great. You can tell that, there was a lot more love, a lot more interest put into this movie than there was for Temple of Doom. It feels like there was somebody with some issues with Temple of Doom. Maybe the writers who wrote Howard the Duck, I don't know, but I love this. Like, we haven't even gotten to like the kind of the homage to the Raider scene in the desert, and I'm already just on board with this film. I was watching it today, and just these scenes are just like, they're entertaining and interesting. And I love that Indiana Jones is just so kind of taken aback by how smart his father came off with the umbrella scene. And
yeah,
I love the fact that when we go to I think it's Iraq or Iran or wherever this location's at, like there's a sequence where they're trading the ability to get on land for vehicles. So they're given this like I don't know, this consulate or whatever he is, like vehicles. And the guy knows all about the vehicle, but it's actually a very well cleverly put moment, because when you think about it, that like most movies wouldn't do that. They would just have the bad guys already in the land. There's no explanation, but Spielberg and his writers and all his cast and crew take the time out to have this small little scene to give them information how these people got approved to go to this country. They don't have to explain it. They just give these people property and land and stuff like that. And it leads to what I think is a great scene where like they have to figure out how to rescue Marcus Brody and his father, who get taken. Actually, when does his father get taken? Because that's right, because Indiana distracts them, and his father, Indiana's father, sneaks on board tank to rescue Marcus Brody, but then gets taken hostage because one of I think the main Nazi guy gets down there and stuff like that. I like that they know that Indiana's there, and he sends Sala to find horses so that they can rescue him.
Camels.
Yeah, no camels, horses. And we of course get the guy from the boat chase come back, and he's shot and killed because protecting the grail and stuff like that. And then of course we get the very atypical Indiana Jones sequence where he's trying to chase down the tank, and he's doing it on horse. But before that, Sala brings camels, as you alluded to. He's like, or no, does he say he wants camels, not horses? Oh no, that's right. He brings camels, but Indiana basically knocks a guy off a horse and takes the horse and stuff like that. And all this stuff is great. It's all very much Spielbergian and Indiana Jones. And I love the pen stuff with the ink and putting the rock in the machine, the gun, which disables one of the guns, so they have to use a small machine gun or whatever. And of course he has to have the fight on top of the tank as people are dying, and he has a fight with the main Nazi guy, and it leads to him and Henry or Indiana Jones and the Nazi guy falling off the cliff. And
great Looney Tunes moment.
Yeah, the guy,
it's pure Bugs Bunny,
right? He's like, I think he falls down the cliff or whatever, and he like falls over and just keeps falling over like the tank, and just you can see the mannequin just kind of in the rubble and shit.
Yeah, I like the Bugs Bunny moment where everybody thinks that he fell off, Indiana Jones fell off, and they're all they're all peering over, and they take their hats off, and they're all like
Yeah.
solemn, and then he just comes up behind him, and he's like looking over the cliff.
They just like look over and they're like, they just do double
and,
take.
and then to top that off, he's like just went through like all this hell fighting
Yeah.
on a almost dying, almost falling off a cliff, and then his dad's like, come on, and then he like falls
Yeah, he
down. He's like,
just
what are you
smacks him.
sitting around? He's like, what are you sitting around for? We gotta go.
Doesn't his hat just like kind of roll up on him or something like that?
Yeah,
Just
it
like out
just
of the
like
wind.
rolls in. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you remember when you saved me or you saved the whip? I'm just gonna roll up on you. Yeah, it's great. I love it. And of course, this takes us to the temple, which I think is called something of Petra, but it's like the treasury, I think is what it is. And this is the stuff I truly most remember. I love the Castle of Vermilion and stuff like that, but this is the stuff that I'm sure you most really remember and I mostly remember.
Of them walking up to the outside
Yeah.
of it is iconic. Them on the horses, and you have the camera moving in on it.
Yeah, and that temple, whatever it is, apparently it went from, it's like the Reese's Pieces thing where it went from having like a few thousand visitors every year to, because this movie was so popular and being Indiana Jones, that location now has millions of visitors every year because of what Spielberg and them did. And it's supposed to be really cool to see up front from what I hear, but most artifacts are. But the stuff that I mostly remember is like, they go into the temple, and of course is similar to like Temple of Doom, where they're watching people basically be murdered. And I love the idea of just like this like booby trapped situation where the first one is like a rotating blades that chop up your head or just like mutilate you or whatever. I love the fact that in order for Indiana to do this, he shoots Sean Connery's character, so therefore he has a reason in an unfortunate situation to do that. That book comes in handy where he's able to kind of get information and figure out what he needs to do, like going into blades and going over it, stops the rollers. I didn't notice this till today, but you can actually see the two bad guys in the background as he's doing that. So they're watching him as he's getting ready to go in the steps of Jehovah, the spelling of it. So I thought that was like a nice little touch. But then he goes on the Jehovah thing, almost falls to his death, and you learn that Jehovah's spelled differently. And then of course the leap of faith, the walk of God, or whatever, is where I think it's really fascinating, really cool, the kind of matte painting that they do, and they're able to mask the actual kind of walkway. Because you can only imagine you go in there, maybe like the way it's kind of the effect that it has on your eyes and stuff like that. Yeah, the optical illusion. But like it gets to the point where he's able to walk on it, and it gets to the end where he throws all the sand. But the walkway is just like this normal looking walkway, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense like how it would look the way it is. But it's clever, it's tense. Yeah,
I always thought that. And then, but what it reminds me of, there's a viral video online, just some guy who is about to drive into a tunnel. You can find it online, and there's actually it's water, but the water is just kind of, it's a tunnel that curves, and the water's sitting there, and it's pretty still, and the way it's reflecting the wall, it looks like there's two lanes, and one of them just drops off into some like cavern just because it's reflecting the ceiling. And so in the video, this guy's just sitting there, and he's like, oh, what do I do? And he's not like so scared to come in. And you see another car come in, and they like swerve over to avoid it. And then a second car comes and just barely touches the water, and you see the ripples, and he's like, oh, it's water. And then he just drives in. But
that's pretty crazy.
Whenever I would see that video, whenever I see it like reposted somewhere, I always think about this movie, because it's kind of like the same thing from Straight On. It could be like this optical illusion that the texture of it just matches so well with the cave in front of it. But of course, all you'd have to do is kind of like step either which way and you'd see it. But from Straight On,
right. And that's brilliant stuff, because it's like something like you have to think about. Like, you can't just, when you're writing like a story or you're like doing your production design, like that, like I don't know, I wouldn't think about that being kind of like the last kind of trial for Indy. So it's actually really cleverly done and really thought about and really kind of smart, because you could just walk across a bridge and maybe fall off, but no, they're doing it where it's an optical illusion. And who thinks about that kind of stuff when they're doing the storyboarding and stuff like that. That's the work of like really smart people.
Mm-hmm.
He finds the Templar Knight or the Knight, whatever, who's there to protect the Holy Grail. And of course, this guy's 700 plus years old, can barely hold a sword up because he falls backwards, like, I don't know, a Benny Hill cartoon or something like that. And this whole scene is notable for being one of the first real true visual effects work that has ever been done, where Walter Donovan and Elsa come in there, and she of course gives him the wrong goblet or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
there's something bad. But the whole sequence where he takes a drink and you start to see him decay in real time apparently is like revolutionary. Like it's before, because it's of course right after the Abyss, right before Terminator, but apparently they shot different plates, or not plates, they shot different portions of it and then kind of stitched together in the digital computer. So it's like really seamless. It's actually quite horrifying. It might actually be a little more horrifying than the melting faces because
Yeah,
it's a
I
little
think
more
it's creepier
realistic.
than that. Yeah.
Yeah. And you see like dissolve into dust. It's like, that's a terrible fate, but he deserved it. It's kind of a nice ending to his character. And,
And he falls
you
on
know,
Elsa, doesn't he? Like as a skeleton, like his hand fall on her or something like that. I'm trying to remember.
yeah, like he's holding on to her, and Indiana has to like pull her off, and then he falls
Yeah.
back into the wall, and that's when he like disintegrates and stuff like that. And I mean, it's the one thing that Indiana Jones definitely doesn't hold back on is horrifying imagery,
Yeah.
But I mean, as we know, in lore and stuff like that, Jesus was apparently a carpenter or whatever. So it makes a lot of sense that he wouldn't be somebody that's interested in gold. And he has a couple that's very simple and looks like it's been worn down, like with some kind of pad or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
he takes a drink of it and it works. And for the
You have
pre or the
chosen
night,
wisely.
yeah, he's like, you chosen wisely. Which I love the fact that he's like, oh, you're here. You're a weird looking knight though. Okay, look, what is this uniform that you're wearing? And he goes out and saves his dad, and Elsa takes the cup and of course does the thing that she doesn't pay attention to or listen to. Don't take it over the seal. The idea of like, your non-willingness to give things up that might be important is kind of the lesson here. She doesn't want to do that. She falls to her death in the pit of smoke or whatever. But Indiana Jones finally comes to his senses and lets the cup go and realizes that his family is more important.
And he is getting drawn in it to the same degree that she is, and it's
Yeah.
his dad that's the one that says let it go. So it kind of is a good moment for those two, that his dad is kind of saying let it go when he's been the one that's been so obsessed with it. So it's like his kind of like completion of his arc is him letting it go and realizing for him that he wants to save his son, and he can only save his son by telling him to let this thing go. That
it's also great that I think once he actually saw his lifelong goal, he either came to two realizations: I've completed my goal, or this wasn't worth my time and effort. Like the idea of obsession is a thing that runs rampant through this whole entire franchise. The idea of like fascist governments wanting a power to destroy all, or a man who becomes obsessed with the cup of Christ, or a man that becomes obsessed with the cross of Coronado and it almost kills him. And the idea of obsession it can be a thing where it can be too powerful and end up ruining you, because if his father had died and he still went for the cup, he would have died. And in the end, the obsession is less important than the stakes of your family or your loved ones or whatever. So it's fascinating because once he lets it go, and once his father goes off to the ice castle, and they become friends again, and snowmen and stuff like that, they ride off into the sunset trying to save Marcus Brody from falling off a horse. And that's the end of the movie. It's great. It's like, oh, we named the dog Indiana. That's a great line, and Salah's laughing, and he's like, I love that dog, because that's actually a story point in the Young Indiana Jones series where they have to leave Indiana behind as they go on their whirlwind adventures. And I just think it's funny. He's like, well, I mean, I love my name Indiana. Sean Connery's like, we named the dog Indiana. Like, what are you doing? And Salah starts laughing, and Marcus Brody almost falls off a horse. And then they ride into the sunset as the Indiana Jones song plays. So it's a good way to pay off. And it would have been nice if like they just left it alone after this, because it feels like a concluding to a trilogy that really works.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a solid end. It feels so wrapped up, even
Yeah,
emotionally wrapped up, that to continue on, I think just like does a disservice to that as a whole. I mean, it doesn't affect like those movies obviously directly, but when you
yeah,
look at the franchise as a whole and you start getting not just one other, but now two others, it's like if I mean if Dial of Destiny isn't any good, then you're getting close to half of the franchise not being that great.
right. Yeah, I agree. It just doesn't make any sense. It's when you have your cake and you eat it too type of scenario. Like you already
Yeah.
have your cake, and now you're eating more of it than you need to. And I think what makes this movie work is just the dynamic of all the characters. You know, you bring in his father, you allow that to progress into, eventually they kind of come to their senses and realize that they're more important to each other than a cup of, somebody or whatever. And I like the fact that, this story just, it feels like more about family than it does anything. This does what Fast and Furious does, like least for or least better and stuff like that. And it just when you shift it, and I've read the script that Frank Darabont wrote for the next Indiana Jones movie, the one that came out that was Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and I think it would have worked. But I just think that when you start getting into territory where you're just at a point where it's too late, there's just too much going on, it's not as fun, you bring in a son of a woman that
Yeah.
he hasn't seen in forever, it just
There's also
uh,
now it's been a while since I
uh,
saw Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but from what I
yeah.
remember, there was a lot of CGI use in the adventure scenes.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it
it
was
goes back to
bad.
like we kind of talked about this in the Jurassic Park review,
Uh,
where what makes a lot of these older films such a big classic is they did so much practical. Um,
yeah,
they only use CGI when like necessary to really enhance the story. And then what you get is all these new films that just rely so heavily on CGI just to like do an adventure scene that they could have. I get that it's probably like a money saving thing, or there's probably some like business reason to do
yeah.
it. But from the film art standpoint, it's just like it just hurts the movie, I think, when you do
Well, I
things
mean, you can
like the
see that,
swinging
like,
through the vines.
right, right, absolutely. It's so bad. I mean, I can give you two examples right now. When this video posts, the Flash came out, right? It's already
Mhm.
out. I'm sure you've seen it as this video posts.
In the future, yeah,
This,
I've seen it.
yeah, the future Rob has seen this movie
And
already,
what I think
but
about it is I didn't like it. There, you can use either one of those.
but no, in all seriousness, like the Flash is a fun movie, but the
Huh.
CGI is terrible. It's the same thing in Ant-Man Quantumania. It's like you started seeing the
Yeah.
Transformers movie. Like what made Jurassic Park work, or Terminator 2 work, or The Abyss work, and I guess to an extent Pirates of the Caribbean work. The visual effects do not need to stand out. They need to be part of the movie. They need to instill. I mean, you could have special effects in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade if they accentuated the movie. They weren't
Mhm.
they weren't standing out. Like that's what the problem with the MCU has become in the DCEU. And
Yeah.
a lot of movies where they just stand out. I think the best looking CGI that I've seen in the last year is probably Rocket, but he's a main character. I think they did a really nice job with Rocket,
Yeah.
but he's there to accentuate the story. He's not sticking
Yeah.
out as like, yeah, it's like when you start doing the Terminator, well, I guess you could say Terminator, the recent ones, but when you start seeing Transformers, like it's all a jumbled mess. It doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. But here, like when you have something, as you said before, real and tangible that you can touch and feel, like the T-Rex or something like that, it just,
I mean, I think about like the chase scene in the desert with the tank
yeah,
versus like and that entire sequence and Indiana Jones going on the tank and falling off and the like things happening inside the tank versus Kingdom of the Crystal Skull where they're doing the chase through the forest and he's swinging off
yeah.
vines and everything's green screen around them, and like one of them you feel the tension and the other one just like looks silly.
Well, I can tell you the best moment in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is not like the beginning, it's not that sequence you're talking about. It's the chase scene through Harvard or wherever, whatever campus that Indiana Jones works for.
Mhm.
He's just basically found Mutt, which is the Shia LaBeouf character. And there's this chase sequence, and they drive through the library, and all this stuff that's happening, but it's all done practically, and it feels good. It feels like an Indiana Jones thing. But like you said, you get to the forest thing, and there's the swinging monkeys. There's like the tree cutting down things, which looks like the ants. Like nothing looks real, and it feels weird. And yeah, it becomes a crutch almost for these movies. Like Jurassic World Dominion was the same thing, when they're like driving through, or they're like their chase sequence with the raptors through the whatever city they're in. Everything looks like weird and out of place, and
because I think you have like we were talking about this. This film felt like it had the balance of all the two Indiana Jones that came before it, and it had the practical, so it made it feel real and you felt connected to it.
I mean, yeah, what I look at is like the practicality allows this real world feel that I mean, I guess if you go into space, like I think the best person that uses visual technology is Christopher Nolan at this point. There may be some other directors, but like for instance, like Oppenheimer, which comes out soon, doesn't even really use visual technology. It uses like real world effects and stuff like that. So I don't know how he did it, but he's able to make you feel like an atomic bomb goes off without using digital technology, which I don't know how he's going to do that. I don't know if that's like they use practical explosions.
I heard, and I don't know if it's true, but I read that they essentially set off like a mini nuke. I don't know if it's actually a nuke, but they set off an actual like explosion big enough to create a mushroom cloud.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know, I didn't read the entire article, but what it seemed to me just by like the glances, it's essentially like shooting a miniature, that they shot a miniature like nuke,
miniature bomb,
miniature bomb that was able to like replicate it. But I mean, again, like
that'd be pretty amazing if that happened.
But that would be cool.
Yeah, but I mean, in the end, like we can't, unfortunately, unless you go on and become a famous director, or I take over ILM or something like that. Nothing's really going to change with that. But I just think when the advent of Jurassic Park, for better or worse, is the advent of like the digital age, and I think it's nice to go back and watch films like Poltergeist or this film, or the movies of the 80s and 70s when digital technology was not really a thing. I know Star Trek 2 used a little bit of digital technology, stuff like that, and Tron did as well, but I just think that's why this movie works. I think it's why it's special. Yes, it wasn't well received. Yes, it made way less than most of the other movies. Actually, I think it made a little bit more than Temple of Doom. I think it made 4 worldwide, 400 million, which I think is close to $1 billion today, maybe a little bit less. But I think you can talk on this too. I just think it's a film that is entertaining, has great action set pieces, has great characters, has 2 characters in Sean Connery and Harrison Ford, which have great chemistry, and it is funny, is enjoyable, is entertaining, and I think is the reason why I like it so much. And once again, it's the movie that of the Indiana Jones trilogy I watched the most as a kid. I had a videotape of it where the beginning you could tell was taped off like HBO or something like that, because it would like do the scan line situation problem where like the first portion of it would just like go out of focus, and like the lines and stuff like that would happen. And it's just a movie that I hold dear, when it comes to action adventure. And it may not be the best of the franchise. People might think the first one is, but I think it's definitely my favorite. So
I would agree. I think it's my favorite. I like all of them.
Yeah.
When I would say like if I would, all 3. Are there any other ones that were made?
No, I don't know about any ones. I just know 3 of them.
So I like the 3 Indiana Jones movies that were made. And if I put if I rank them, even though Temple of Doom would probably be number 3, it doesn't mean like that I don't like hate it or anything. It's just where I'd rank it. And I also think Temple of Doom is just kind of weird, being like it's a prequel, and that there's characters that were introduced that you never see again, like Short Round, you like never even hear of them again. And it's just an odd movie that feels so like just displaced from Raiders and Last Crusade.
Right. Yeah, and that's all in part of Steven Spielberg feeling kind of guilty for Temple of Doom and kind of its reception. He knew that people wanted this type of film, this going back to Nazism and this kind of great action adventure sense that he was able to craft with the help, of course, writers and his cinematographer and cast and crew like electricians and stuff like that. Just a film that felt more inclined to be closer to the original in the end. I think bringing back in a more prominent role of Denholm Elliott and John Rhys-Davies is always a welcome addition. Unfortunately, Denholm Elliott passed away just a couple years after this film came out, and John Rhys-Davies went off to do Lord of the Rings. But I think
Sliders.
Sliders. Yes, Sliders. Thank you for reminding me. I watched that like a few months ago. That series is weird, but I kind of love it.
Yeah.
But I just think overall, it feels like a well done action film with a lot of great characters and story that works. And it would have been interesting to see Chris Columbus's take, but apparently it was very racist. So I don't know. But they also brought the writer from Inner Space in to do this. So
Inner Space.
Yeah, which is another great. That's another movie that has great action and comedy in it. So I love that movie.
Yeah,
Mr. Igo, I need that syringe. Anyways, but other than that, was there anything else you want to mention before we head out?
I don't think so. If you haven't seen this movie, I mean, you have seen it if you're watching this, but if you haven't, it's definitely a recommended one. And it's among those movies that I think will go down, in history as one of the great action movies, and people will be watching it for 50 hundreds of years, while so many movies that are nowadays that people are arguing about will be long forgotten. So
yeah,
it's
like
definitely one
Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah.
Oh god, I hate that movie so much. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's definitely worthy of watch. So so with that said, that'll do it for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Once again, on the journey to the Dial of Destiny, I have one more film that unfortunately doesn't exist, but I do have to talk about. So I will be bringing in a special guest for that one. But Rob, thank you for invading my channel. Yes, it's Satan.
Oh, okay.
I brought in Satan and his minions.
That's
I think Satan was. I think.
Is he forcing you to watch it?
I think so. Him and his partner Saddam Hussein. I think we're forcing you to watch it. Up there for the flowers. No, I'm just kidding. But Rob, thank you for invading my channel for a week. I know you were on the Jurassic Park episode, which actually premieres the day we're recording this. Anyways, with that said, you do once again have a channel that has content. I actually went back and I can't remember what I watched. I think I watched your highlight reel or something like that just last week or so. But anyways, with that said, where's that content
at? You can find me on YouTube at Robert Dodrill, and I'm also on Twitter at Robert Dodrill, where I don't post a lot, but Twitter I've been trying to tweet a little bit more, and sometimes I just tweet random ideas about remake, like how I would remake something like the Powerpuff Girls CW series. I have a tweet about what I would have done instead if they didn't cancel it. Not that it should have been done at all, but I try to do some fun things like that. And then I have a lot of short films and stuff on my YouTube that you can check out.
Yes, definitely check them out because they're worthy of watch, especially Beyond the Fall Off. Am I saying that right now? I say that wrong every time and I feel bad, but which is great with fellow classmate Sam. So definitely
that's my latest one. Right now I'm working on writing a feature action that hopefully everything will move forward from some people in Atlanta. And then after that, my goal is to do a micro budget feature that I'll shoot here locally. And I'm still working on the story for that.
Excellent. So yeah, look forward to that. I am of course at Movie Emporium. That's where I hold all my content, including the Fifth Dimension. Right now, as of recording this video, I'm still in the middle of doing a Mission Impossible series run through. Just posted Jurassic Park. Also other reviews, typical movie reviews and all that good stuff. So look forward to that. So without further ado, we'll see you next week for the unfortunate Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which does not exist. And for myself and Rob, we'll see you guys later. Peace out, guys.